Previously on our Kentucky Route Zero saga. I don't know what the hell we're playing, to be honest, but I'm totally okay with it.
Incredibly odd.
You know, you play a character named Conway. He is an antique shop delivery man, and he has this really old truck that he's driving around in.
I would describe it as Lynchian magical realism.
The walls fall away, and you just see the horses in the backyard.
Conway hurts his leg in the middle of a rubble collapse or something along those lines.
The next thing you see is your delivery truck full of antiques drive right through this portal without even asking a question. Welcome to episode 90 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week we play Act 2 of Kentucky Route Zero. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCord, and today I have two friends with me. The first friend, you know him, you love him. His name is Michael Ruffalo.
I'm excited to talk about another episode in a very strange and interesting game.
Yeah, strange is the right word to say here. And our second friend, it'll be his third time now on the podcast, Adam Iannetta. Adam, welcome back.
Good to be back. Third time's the charm.
And we are here today to play Episode 2 of Kentucky Route Zero, developed by Cardboard Computer and published by Annapurna Interactive. This is the third part of our multi-part Kentucky Route Zero series. So if you're just picking it up here, you may want to go back to our Act 1 episode, listen to that first, and then come back. This episode will be here for you when you're ready. Gentlemen, last time we left off, we had just entered a bizarre portal to what we assume is Kentucky Route Zero, but you don't really end up on the road to start, do you?
No, far from it.
So where the heck are we?
We are... I can't actually remember the name of the building itself, but you're...
Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces? Is that it?
I think that's it.
Yes, and it is this very cinematic opening of the character's Lulu Chamberlain, is that correct?
Lula Chamberlain, yeah.
I'm sorry, I keep screwing this up. But it opens with a very cinematic, tight shot of Lula Chamberlain, I think, going over some notes. And correct me if I'm wrong, but she kind of immediately gets into this, I don't want to say dialogue, but it's reading letters, reading an application or a response to an application that she's put in to be featured. And it essentially says, like, I'm sorry, we have very high standards and you are not selected. We encourage you to apply again. And yet what I found was a pretty funny response where she says, I spent a whole 10 minutes photocopying things on my lunch. So very clearly I won't be able to apply next year as well. It's too much of a burden. And yeah, it's kind of this snarky, funny response to a pretty boilerplate standard rejection letter.
Yeah, because she's actually applying for this like very prestigious art fellowship or scholarship, I don't remember which, but obviously related to Limits and Demonstrations, which we played a little while ago. Weird how that happened, huh?
It's almost like there's this weird tie between all of the stories.
Timelines? What are those?
Yeah.
But beyond getting her rejection, she then goes back to her very boring job of working with, as you said, reclaimed spaces. So you're given some really funny dialogue where it's like, hey, we want to convert X space into Y space. I don't know about you guys, but I thought that a lot of the writing here, and only here, in this office was witty.
I thought this office was so funny.
This was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And there needs to be a TV series akin to NBC's The Office based around this environment. 100%.
I just want floor 3 with the bears. I just want a whole show with that.
Why are there bears there?
I
don't know.
I genuinely thought that was some sort of bureaucratic acronym, and I thought bears must clearly stand for something. It can't just there can't just be a floor of bears. And I was wrong. I was one of the happiest instances in my life where I've been proven wrong.
pleasantly
discovering that there were
surprised.
bears on that floor.
So we should probably do the setup. After Lula has her back and forth and you come up with a response to it, I think we end up getting back to Conway and Shannon, and they are at the front desk. And I think they're lost along the way, and they realize, oh, we should probably stop in here and get some directions. And they have this, I think, pretty funny conversation of like, do you think we're on the inside or do you think we're on the outside? And it kind of becomes, I don't want to say a running joke, but it is something that comes up in the dialogue options a little bit later, where you approach the front desk and you ask the receptionist or whoever's running the desk to, hey, are we on the inside or the outside? And I think the response is like, both. Like, are we not at both at the same time? It's very philosophical and sets up this really fun, or at least I found it fun, kind of philosophical comedy throughout the episode or throughout the act.
The one thing I noticed with the dialogue here was that, as far as Act 1 was concerned, I had mentioned previously that I was never allowed to ask the question that was genuinely on my mind, like, what's going on? Or why is any of this happening right now? It was always some sort of non sequitur about, oh, do you like poetry or something like that? And this time I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that a lot of the responses that I was given as options were actually very close to what I wanted to know. It's, how do I get from here to there? That's all I want to know. Or what is this place? Or how does any of this work? And I mean, oftentimes the people would answer back with some sort of weird philosophical, well, in order to navigate the zero, you need to drive with intention. But you also don't. And I just kept thinking, okay, the zero is akin to Harry Potter's The Room of Requirement, where you need to be looking for something very specifically in order to get to where you're going to. And I don't know if it was Conway or Shannon or the dog that thought, I think we just need a bureaucratic nightmare. That's all we need right now. Because that's where we ended up. This is a bureaucratic nightmare where we are right now. And that's basically what happens. The secretary tells you, oh, you need to go to floor 5 first, and you navigate this 5-tier office, which is also inhabited by bears, on the 3rd floor. And they then tell you, oh, Lula's not here, you need to go down. And then Lula tells you, well, you'll need to get this paperwork. And it's just, I feel like I'm filing for CRA documents or things right now. So.
Yes, painful. The whole
the
episode,
tax man's gonna get you.
the whole act is about the comedy of bureaucracy, that you only really need directions from one specific person and you know that they're there, but you can't even just go up to them and ask them for the directions. You have to jump through a bunch of different hoops, hop from floor to floor to floor, drive out and then drive back, all so that way you can find the 5 Dogwood Drive to make your last delivery. And the real comedy with the bears, I think we set it up, but we didn't actually explain why it's so funny. Once you get past Marianne, the receptionist, and she tells you, oh, unfortunately no one's available except for Lula Chamberlain. I'll set up an appointment for you right now. You'll have to go up, to the, what is it, 2nd or 5th floor?
Well, they say the 5th floor,
that.
but she's actually on the 1st floor.
Right, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And so when you get into the elevator, it lists off to you what's on the different floors, and it's on floor 3 that it just says bears. And you're like, well, okay. And you go up to the 5th floor, and as the elevator moves up, you just see a whole floor of what look like brown bears.
Yep.
That are all just, they look over to the elevator as it's, passing by on the floor, and then they look back away. And you're just, I couldn't help but smile and laugh to myself that it was so absurd but so unexpected and funny.
Which was the exact same reaction as the other floor where they're having a conference, and the people just turn around and they look at you exactly like the bears did.
It's like the deadpan stare from The Simpsons when Homer goes to pick up Maggie from the nursery, and it's just this room of just nothing but babies, and they're all just staring at you deadpan, just following you with their eyes. it's very unsettling, and I kept telling myself, thank goodness, this is a point and click adventure game, because I can safely say I do not think I'm going to have to fight a bear in this game, or defend myself from a bear attack because of the way this game works.
Did you guys go to the floor with the bears?
I did. I had to do it.
So what happens when you go? Because
absolutely nothing. It's literally just the doors open and the bears just slowly follow your eyes from one way to the other as you make your way across. There's nothing really interactive in there. It's not like you get the option to, pet the bear or feed the bear or anything like that. You go in and you realize, well, there's nothing here for me, and then you exit.
You end up jumping through a bunch of hoops to find Lula Chamberlain. What the character that I was playing, the Conway that I was, as soon as she told me that I had to go other places or I had to fill out other paperwork first, I think the dialogue choice I said, but what if I didn't? Like, can we just not? Can we not jump?
You were trying to Obi-Wan Kenobi him and just be like, I will not fill out any paperwork today.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
That's right.
And yes, so and it actually worked. What I assume is it allowed me to skip a lot of the busy work that would have been in this level or game.
What?
Which I think is very smart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I did have to go up to the floor, I think it is, for records. And you find that they have the most inane
filing
stupid
system
way to organize. Yes, it's alphabetical, but also related to category.
Yeah,
exactly.
So automotive works because there's also cars,
vehicles,
boats,
it's
stuff like that.
I'm like, of course you would.
It's very much like. Did you guys ever read the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket?
I think I read one or two of them.
There's one book right towards the end where the Baudelaire orphans find themselves in this library with like an equally just anxiety-inducing filing system where they're like, oh, we're trying to figure out or we're trying to find information on the Baudelaire house fire. Well, it might be under B for Baudelaire, but it could be under H for house, or it could be under F for fire. So we're gonna have to check all three. So
maddening. So yeah, I think they made the comedy of jumping through these bureaucratic hoops pretty funny. And then if you didn't find that funny, you'd be hard. I think we're hard pressed to find someone who didn't find the unexpected bears on the third floor also pretty funny.
I think for me, this is like easily my highlight of the episode. Because it's fair to say that my interest in the episode continued to go down immediately after this.
Really?
I mean, it was such a high point.
Yeah. Might I say, after that, this episode bad, but we'll get to that later on.
Once you get a sense of, where you need to go and what you need to do, they actually bring up a really good point, which was, all of these roads had the same name at one point, or a bunch of roads were Dogwood Drive at some point, and now that we have computers, this is actually an issue because you can't have multiple Dogwood Drives without them being solved. And it actually got me thinking really deeply about Google Maps and how they actually solved that issue. But they end up finding a way. So the point being, they renamed a bunch of these roads with different adjectives or adverbs to make them unique. And you needed to figure out which 5 Dogwood Drive you needed to get to. So you go, you end up finding the info, you go down, and I think it's Marianne, the receptionist, that tells you that you should probably go see, is it Dr. Turner?
Dr. Truman.
Dr. Truman. Right, like the Truman Show.
That's right.
Yes. And so you begin the quest to go out onto the road to find the Dogwood Drive that you need to, and then ultimately Dr. Truman. What leads us on this quest? Where do we need to go?
Well, initially? There's two things, right? It's like you should go see Dr. Truman because your leg bad. And even I found the walking speed was like painfully slow, and I get it.
So slow.
His leg is broken, but do you have to do that to the player? I digress. You're also said, one of the other things, Lula's like, hey, you need to go to this church because at this church we have some records that you may want to go find because your records may be there. And at that point you get on the Zero to either find the records or visit Dr. Truman.
And apparently the congregation of this church used to live inside of this cave that is now the office. And, these bureaucratic type people literally came in and said, well, this is nice. We're going to have to kick you out now. But don't worry, we're going to move your church to this giant industrial storage unit. And the entire congregation just left, and now they all live within this storage unit, or at least they go there for service. And I think one of the strangest things was, up until now, I knew I was navigating Kentucky, or at least an artist's interpretation of Kentucky. And Marianne gives you the strangest directions to get there and simply says, so you're going to drive until you get to the crystal and then just make your way back from whence you came. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I know I've already seen a burning tree, so a crystal's going to be nothing.
Can you take a step back and describe what Route Zero is? Because I think for anyone that's maybe not seeing it, it's bizarre. It's like a donut, right? Essentially.
Yeah, it almost it's. Is it a wormhole? Is it a...
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's like a cave system that's infinite because it's completely circular, and it seems kind of like it's sound waves, and that it kind of has a rippling effect as you go through it.
Exactly, because... Go ahead.
No, go for it, Adam.
Well, the one thing I noticed was when you finally find the crystal... you get this option to click, which is I'm assuming it's a frequency or a wavelength. It's just a series of numbers, and as soon as you click that, it changes your route. So the way you first came is now completely different, and then you end up at the storage unit where the office once was. So it's completely changed because you've now hopped onto a different wavelength, and it just We're not in Kentucky anymore. So.
Just one quick digression. Did you guys go into your inventory at all during your travels on Route Zero?
I did
not.
Okay, what did you find in your inventory, Michael?
I don't think anything out of the usual. I had the 20-sided die for the 3 that were playing in the basement. I had the notebook, and then there was the postcard that I still don't think I understood. It's got a drawing on the back, or a diagram on the back.
Okay. Well, you may have also been handed a flyer or a brochure of some of the beautiful places that you can visit along the Zero.
Oh,
now I want to
totally forgot about it.
Now I want to know, did you flip to the back of that brochure?
I honestly don't remember.
Well, if you flip to the back of the brochure, you were treated with a phone number. That is an actual Kentucky phone number that
I'm so excited right now.
I am going to dial for you right now.
Suspense is killing.
Hello. You have dialed into Here and There Along the Echo, a guide to the Echo River for drifters and pilgrims. This guide is a public service provided by the Bureau of Secret Tourism.
And so it goes on and on like that. You can dial certain spaces. There's one option where it's like, are you holding a snake right now? If you're holding a snake right now, dial 4. And it gives you descriptions of some of the places that you can visit. And also, there's some weird options in there. I implore you, if you're playing this, dial the number on the back and play with that voice. It's very fun to play with for a little while.
Do they say anything about bears?
Nothing about bears, only snakes.
Well, I'm gonna have to try find it myself.
So now that I derailed the conversation completely with a phone number,
I thought that was super cool, and I do remember that brochure now that you mention it. But yeah. I absolutely did not go to any of those because I was so laser focused on completing the act.
And I liked how in the last episode I was like, I'm a guy who's just trying to get through things as quickly as possible. But yet I dialed this phone number, which is actually based in Gracie, Kentucky. So there you go. Another weird one for you.
That is hilarious.
Did you go to any of the different directions on the map? that they give you?
I had a real rough time navigating like the zero. That to me was the worst. I'm like, can I not just go where I want to go? I don't want to like go to the crystal, move back, find the goggles, turn around, do a 360. That was really frustrating for me. So probably not the right guy to ask.
I was actually the same way. I was a little crunched for time when I was playing the game, so I just kind of told myself, okay, you can do a little bit of exploring, but don't get too carried away. So I just, as soon as I found the crystal, I kind of just told myself, I'm sure this could go on forever with puzzles and misdirection, so I need to get to where I'm going right now.
The infinite possibilities there, the huge amount of places that they could take me, got me really laser focused on making sure I did not get lost. So I ended up, completing that as much as I could. So once you get to the storage space, which is now the church, and the Bureau of Reclaim Services is in the former church, you meet a janitor who who finds all the tapes of the past sermons, and I think you essentially ask him for directions, if I remember correctly. While Shannon goes off to find those, you have a conversation with him, and you get to choose like what type of conversation are you going to have. Are you going to have something very surface level? Are you going to try and go deep, or are you just going to be pleasant? And the conversation that I had with the janitor was like, tell me about faith. Like, is this something you believe in? Like, are you part of the congregation? Do they come here still? And what you end up finding out is that as soon as they moved here, people stopped coming to the church, which to me, I found, again, kind of funny. Not like funny, haha, on its face, there's a floor of bears. But funny in that, like, a church is supposed to be more than just the building it's in. A church is supposed to be the body of people that go there. And I think it was funny that as soon as they lost the building, they lost the body of people that went there.
I took that whole thing, I interpreted as like a gentrification thing, because like they had their space taken and they were moved to this industrial park that they didn't ask to be a part of. So I was like, is this kind of like a way that he's describing what happens to people when they're gentrified out of their communities? But I guess to each their own in that respect.
I was actually really curious because I know up until this point you have the option to respond either as Conway or as Shannon throughout this point of the game, and I was curious if there was the option to actually play as Shannon and go into the actual storage units and try and figure out what's going on. And I kind of thought to myself, oh, I must have just picked Conway's adventure instead of Shannon's, and so now I'm just kind of peer chatting with him. So I was really curious, do you know if there is an option to actually play as Shannon and go inside the I guess the catacombs of the storage unit and try and find the document, or are you just, whatever you choose, you're always here with Conway discussing faith and the responsibilities of this janitor to every night replay these recordings of the church sermons?
Yeah, I don't think you have a choice. I think Shannon just goes down to the basement to search for the records, or goes to search for the records while you have this conversation with him. But, again, I'm not sure if it would be a huge difference between whether you play Shannon having the conversation or Conway having the conversation. I think it might just make more narrative sense to, keep Conway moving less, because I think that's actually the impetus, or I think that's actually the crux of it, that his legs really hurt and he can't really move, and Shannon's like, I'm just going to go do this. You stay here.
Doesn't Conway black out?
Oh, you're right. He
just
does.
As you're leaving.
Yeah.
Just as you're leaving.
He blacks out, and that's when Shannon's like, hey, we should probably go see Dr. Truman because your leg's bad. And instead, you go back to the Bureau, find out that everything you need has been processed without you, and that now I guess you should really find Dr. Truman, who, if I'm not mistaken, is at the Museum of Dwellings, correct?
Well, originally that's where his home address was, but once you get there, you realize that his home is gone, and now they've erected this museum there in its place, which is the Museums of Dwellings, which is actually probably my favorite location, second to just the third floor with bears. But probably my favorite location within this entire game, because it is essentially, like, it is literally what it is. It is a museum where everything that is on exhibit to see is just different manners of dwellings, people's houses, and the various forms they come in. There's a bird cage. There's a tent. There's an old
houseboat without any
there's
water.
A houseboat. There's like a train car similar to like a hobo would ride during the night or something
Rail
like
car.
that. And the other reason why I loved this scene so much in this environment was that you are no longer playing as either Shannon or Conway. You are now playing as, at least from what I gathered, you're playing as the residents who still live inside these dwellings, inside the museum itself.
Yeah, there's this real disconnect between what you, the character, are doing and the dialogue that you're receiving. And it sounds as if, I don't know if you guys got the same vibe, that it was the security team or some team that works at the museum that was intentionally dip, duck, dodging, and diving you the whole way through and not wanting to talk to you, while you went from house to house to house, or dwelling to dwelling within this museum to talk to the different people to find out where Mr. Truman was, or Dr. Truman. And the first person you talk with, or at least the first person I talked with, was a woman that was living on a houseboat on land, and she ends up like commenting on the fact that she at least wished that, it would sway a bit for her, because she had always dreamed on living on a houseboat, so at least her dreams were made true. Which, again, like everything in this was kind of comedic unintentionally, or some type of dark comedy without being too dark. And you go from house to house, or again, dwelling to dwelling to dwelling. And I love the atmosphere of this environment. It's absolutely pouring outside. You can open up your umbrella indoors and everyone has a comment about it. And you end up moving closer and closer, and it's one of those things that reminded me so much of Pynchon and Gravity's Rainbow, that it was, you're getting the story as the person who's watching it, as the person who's playing the game, but your character isn't always the one that's telling you the story. You get the story from other people who are observing your character. You get story from the narrator. You get story from what you're reading versus what anyone's saying. And then you get story based on, the dialogue and the choices you make. So this was the moment that struck me the most as like very Pynchon-esque. So as you work your way up from dwelling to dwelling to dwelling, you see the house of the future, and then you see the greenhouses, and all throughout in the background of this massively storming, museum just outside of it, you're seeing, or at least I was seeing, this gigantic eagle.
I thought it was a pterodactyl.
Yeah, it was huge, and I could not figure out what it was other than just a giant bird, and it made me deeply unsettled because you could just see like the silhouette or the shadow of it, and I couldn't quite tell what was in its talons, but it looked like it was grabbing stuff or flying away with stuff. And when you get to the top, you meet a kid named Ezra, who talks about his fun with his friend Julian, who you come to find out is the eagle, and how they've been taking houses and bringing them out into the woods because living in the museum is too creepy and too unsettling. So people go take these houses and move out there. One other thing that I did not mention before we move on about this museum that I thought was so funny is that they destroyed all of the houses that were on this land and then gave anyone who lived in those houses a dwelling inside the museum for them to live in, which was just, again, so like deeply dark and comedic. I thought it was so funny.
Do you think the eagle represents something?
Ooh,
I'm sure it does.
As the eagle takes dwellings away, or takes people away and puts them in the forest?
I think that's too smart for it not to. But like, I honestly don't know what it would mean. Like, eagle often represents America.
That's literally what I was thinking. I was like, I'm like, is the eagle America?
Unpack it for me.
Again, I don't claim to know much here, but my thought was like, I talked about people being disrupted and moved from their place of living when it came to the church, or not their place of living, but their place of worship. So my thought was like, is this eagle a representation of America? and how Americans are typically forced to move to lower income areas if they aren't making enough money. But I just, like, it didn't make sense to me because it went from, a houseboat or a small house out to the forest that would typically cost more money, which doesn't really work here. So I'm really puzzled, to be honest with you. I don't know what the eagle represents here. It has to represent something. Why isn't it just a human or another? Like, that is a very specific representation there.
The only other thing that I can think of is that I have a buddy who's a big, like, Lord of the Rings Tolkien fan, and he used to talk about how Tolkien, he always had certain codes that he would use in his literature, and I guess the eagle was always his way of putting in sort of a deus ex machina moment in his books. So, like, the moment when Gandalf is trapped at the top of the tower and basically looks like, this is going to be the end of him, and the eagle comes and saves him. That's his deus ex machina moment where, it was the trump card and the safe fail. So or the fail safe. I don't know what that has to do with this. But I'm just as confused as you guys. So when it comes to this bird,
what I would love is if you have any ideas to drop them in the Discord. We've got a show discussion channel. I would love to hear what people think this is or what it means, because I am also stumped, just like the guys. Like, it definitely means something. I just don't know what it means.
Yeah, you can find the link to that at leftbehindgame.club.
Once you have this conversation with Ezra, and he talks about his friend Julian and how, oh yeah, I know where Dr. Truman is. He's out there. I was about to leave right now with Julian, and we were going to go find him or talk with him. Like that. The screen kind of flashes dark, and there's like a strike of lightning. And when the flash happens, you see Julian is this eagle that just picks you up in his talons and just starts flying. And then you have control of the map, similar to what you had in Kentucky before when you were driving along the routes. Only now you're just in motion. You are this giant eagle flapping his wings above Kentucky in perpetual motion, and you need to follow the Green River, I think it is, and then hop the lake towards the forest. And I was so amazed, and I don't know why, at how big the map is and how far you have to fly before you get to the forest where everyone was brought to. But I loved the surprise of this moment. I thought it was really great. I thought it was kind of fun and an interesting way to change things up. Instead of, riding on the grid or on the rails of the road, you got to kind of go freeform and find things along the way. But yeah, once you finally go on this long journey, follow the river, hop the lake, you find the forest and you touch down and get into one of, I think, the most visually and auditorily beautiful scenes in a game, especially this game.
Well, you basically, when you finally land in the forest, up until this point, you've been primarily playing as Conway and Shannon, but now you're actually in control of Ezra, who is actually walking alongside your dog. And rather than what we've seen in previous scenes where it's a pre-established setting and you can kind of point and click to specific areas, your options are really just left and right. And when you choose to go right, you're actually, you are moving through the forest, but you're also moving through a bit of an elapsed timeline of events that occur between Shannon and Conway. And, the first is that Conway is there and his leg is really bad at this point and he can barely walk. And Shannon and Conway have their dialogue, but then you as Ezra get to have your own dialogue. And it's actually, it's one of the most endearing moments in this game thus far, because you are playing this child, and as such you have the mind and dialogue options that a child might say. They're so fun loving, and he pets the dog, innocent. And he thinks innocent, absolutely. He pets the dog and thinks to himself, oh, I've always wanted a dog, maybe you'll be my new best friend, and things like that. And it was it was a breath of fresh air compared to all of the deep philosophical, you have to go with intention, but then also don't. And sort of, do you like poetry? And sometimes I just want to pet a dog. That's all I want to do sometimes. Sometimes I just want to pet the dog.
So what I loved about this scene so much was that the way that you make progress is simply running left to right, like is very typical in video game design. But what they've kind of done is, I'm blanking on the exact term of it, but it's kind of like the trees move one direction, you move another, and the background moves a different direction, and you just keep resetting to the left-hand side of the screen. But clearly time has passed and there's progress being made, and at each point Conway is kind of, stuck and tired and realizing like, oh man, like I really don't want to go further. How much further do I have to go? And they give you at least for me, a real sense of, oh man, like we've been making progress. And throughout all of this, there's this, at least I found it, really beautiful music in the background. And you kind of get glimpses of it as you're running across it. Someone's standing in the woods playing this music not far off as you're running. It was just I loved it. It was such a beautiful, beautiful moment in an episode that did not signal to me it was going to be this way, and in a game that signaled it was going to be way more darker and ominous than this.
I just had two thoughts, and the first was I could have swore Ezra changed heights at some point, and maybe that was just my eyes or the way my character moved across a screen very quickly. I was kind of like, by the time we got here, I'm like, what the heck am I playing? This episode in particular, like, there was a lot of tonal whiplash, or maybe not tonal whiplash, but like location and setting whiplash throughout, besides changing characters that really kind of got me. But my thought was, they developed this game over like a 7 or 8 year period, right? So I almost wonder sometime, especially with these earlier episodes, if the earlier episodes are tonally going to match what we see later in the game. Like if they had it completely 100% sketched out from the beginning, because I would hearken to guess that that's not the case. That maybe the game changed, angles maybe a little bit as time went on.
It makes a lot of sense to me.
I'd love to actually figure that out and actually sit down with the developers and ask them, okay, did you guys know exactly what you wanted to do as soon as you kind of like J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter, where, she says to herself before she even starts the first book, I know exactly how the 7th book is going to end. Do you think it was something like that, or was it just kind of a, even writing this was their own choose your own adventure kind of thing? Okay, guys, so heads, this is the way it goes, tails, it goes this way.
Yeah, I think they knew the story they wanted to tell, but maybe they changed along the path. But again, we don't know, because I don't know what the hell's going on here.
You're among friends there.
Jeez. So after all of that background shifting, I think you finally end up finding Dr. Truman in his home, correct? And in the home, you have a conversation. Yes. Ezra and Shannon are in the house, and Conway's having a conversation with Truman. And all that I got from that conversation is that he's a doctor, and he has a lot of debt. And because he has a lot of debt, he's kind of signed a deal with the devil in this case being a pharmaceutical company, and he's
Big Pharma
got him good, and he now has to like rep this drug. And the funniest part of the writing for me was he's like, yeah, I gotta rep this dumb drug called neuropinol.
Something
Neuropinol, and then he's like, it's dumb, and then he goes on to tell all about the wonderful benefits that you'll get out of having this drug.
I love that he's like, yeah, I'm just going to put you under a general anesthetic, and you're going to count down from 5, and then as soon as you start countdowning from 5, and like the words get really blurry, he's like, okay, great, now is this a good time to talk about billing, because X, Y, and Z. I
This
died.
is America.
I thought that was so funny. This is America.
Stereotypical
I
doctor.
thought that was so funny. I thought that was so really well done. I thought it was on point. I thought it was totally fantastic. I really did enjoy this episode, because that's where it leaves off. This episode for me was so much better than the first. The first, I felt like, this is going to be really dark and kind of scary and ominous, and even though it's all being conveyed through text, it's just way too cryptic and not something I'm going to be into. But the real like I guess what I'll call Pynchon-esque comedy of this act or this episode really brought me back in and made me excited to keep playing.
Yeah, I think for me, like I had no clue where this game was going, and I think it's fair for me to say that I didn't get it until I played the next interlude, which we'll be talking about on our next episode, called The Entertainment. I didn't really understand what the main theme of this whole thing was going to be, but as soon as I got there, I'm like, I think I know what this story is about now, but I don't think I should say it on this podcast. You'll have to tune into the next episode. Adam, do you have any final thoughts there?
You know, for me, the way this game has been going, it's completely over my head as far as, you know, my predictions, and I could never fathom any sort of idea that I have a clear understanding of where this game is going, or not even just like a little hint of an idea. And so I love being surprised by what it is that they're throwing at you from time to time, and even, you know, having the chance to finish a chapter and think to myself, what was that? And then, you know, having the chance to go on to the fan wiki that has like this cult following has built, and just dig deeper into the mystery of this game and just go further and further down the rabbit hole. So I'm very excited to see where we go on this trip through Kentucky.
Michael, do you have any other thoughts?
So far, this is the highlight. I've really enjoyed this episode, as much as there were some, you know, setups at the beginning that made me think it was going to be painful. Bureaucracy simulator. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm way more into the story now, and I'm excited to see where it goes. These interludes, I think, were important in setting up the episode.
Yeah, I think my final point is I like the first act better, and you know, maybe some of the interludes. This one just kind of lost me a little bit in the middle, and I didn't like navigating with the eagle or navigating the zero. I felt that was really frustrating, but I'm very curious to see where this is going, and you're going to have to find out where it goes on our next episodes of the Left Behind Game Club. And that is everything that we have to say about Act 2 of Kentucky Route Zero. If you want to find out more about the Left Behind Game Club, you can do so at leftbehindgame.club. On that website, we have a link to our Discord channel where you can talk about Kentucky Route Zero and how what did you say? Sugared water iced tea? What do you say?
Sugar honey iced tea.
Sugar honey iced tea is going on in this game. You can join our Discord, do that. You can find us on Twitter at Left Behind Club and on Instagram at Left Behind Game Club. You can find all of my stuff at Jacob McCord on all major social media platforms and at jacobmccord.com. I make YouTube videos now, so if you want to check those out, you can check those out at youtube.com/Jacob McCord. Adam, the third time is the charm. Thank you so much for joining us. If people want to find your work on the internet, where can they do so?
You can find me on floor 3 with the Bears.
Very good. Michael?
No. No, actually, the best place for people to reach me is just via my website, adamiannetta.ca. It's my online professional profile for my work as a singer, but just as passionate as I am about singing, I am equally passionate about video games and talking with wonderful people like yourselves about great games.
People can find me online on most social places at RuffaloM or michaelruffalo.com. It's under construction, but, you know, maybe it'll be up by the time this launches. And you can find me in the Discord server talking about the craziness of this game. Go to leftbehindgame.club and click on the big Join the Discord button.
And Michael, what do we say to him to end the episode?
And that, my friends, is one less episode left behind.